Since we started the lecture series, this is our 5th month now. We spent the first quarter of this year talking about, it was really a trilogy. So the first 3 lectures this year focused on sort of foundational elements that bordered on the core of our being. So the first lecture was on identity, which some of you might have seen. In the second lecture, we discussed career. So very specifically, what are the foundations of a career that lasts a long time? And more importantly, what's the purpose of a career? You know, a lot of us go through life not understanding why, because we leave university, we leave secondary school, and of course, what people have to do is get a job. But we rarely ever sit to craft what sort of life we want to have, what sort of career we want to have. And, you know, we sort of just go with the flow, and before you know it, we're 60 and unfulfilled and about to retire, and we wonder what we've done with our years. And the third lecture in the first quarter of the year was on purpose. So, how do we infuse purpose into our career? How do we infuse purpose into our pursuit? How do we even identify what purpose is? Do all 8 billion people on earth have a purpose? Maybe some people have purposes that are more special than others. That was not the outcome of the lecture, of course, but these are questions that we all ruminate on. And in that lecture, we try to answer some of those foundational questions, and most importantly, help us situate the local centers of purpose in our own life. So where do we look to find purpose in our own lives? If you've not watched those lectures, I really, really, really encourage you to, when you go back, to spend some time watching them. Last month, we spent time talking about money. But most importantly, what the moral utility of money is. So when you have enough money to eat, to drink, to wear, to put a roof over your head, what do you do with money? Okay, let's say you go on vacations. You go on 3, 4, 5 vacations a year. You buy a new bag every month. You dress really nice, but you still have more money. So what do you do with money? What is the moral utility of money? That was a fundamental question we answered last month. Sometimes when we have these conversations, they might seem a little too philosophical. They might seem a little too out of touch, especially if, oh my God, now I'm barely struggling to get by. I'm barely struggling to pay my transport to even come to this lecture. But you're telling me about what to do with money when, I have more than enough money. That's a wrong way to think about it for 2 reasons. The first is, no matter where you are, you have to make important decisions, important allocations, important value allocations, like what you spend your time on. And if your time equals money and resources, then you have to decide whether or not you have a lot of it. But secondly, you're also not that far from your future. If you're in your 20s, in the next 10 to 20 years, you are probably going to be the wealthiest, the wealthiest version of yourself, or at least those foundations are going to get built. And the principles that you don't inculcate early on, it's going to be very difficult to inculcate them much later. So I encourage you to, when you listen to those lectures, to go with a mind that's incredibly open, and understand that those lessons are not built for a future version of you. They are built for a version of you, the version of you that exists now. And to further these, today we're going to be discussing relationships. Very importantly, not intimate relationships, even though some of the principles here might apply. But the foundation of today's lecture is what are the best ways to build relationships that help unearth the potential that's latent inside of you. Because I think one thing we all agree on, and maybe that's why we're all here, is you can't do life alone. You need people around you. What sort of people do you need around you? How do you find the people you need around you? When you find them, how do you keep them? And how do you put them to work? That's a very important question. How do you put people to work on your behalf? Because if you think of relationships are like having employees. In some sense, right? Because you have to deploy them. You have to, if you own a company or you own a business, you have roles, you hire people for, I want you to take care of marketing, I want you to take care of sales. What you're doing is you're putting human resources to use. But in the context of our own lives, if we treated ourselves as a corporation, if we treated ourselves as people who are fundamentally of value, relationships are the human capital that we put to work on our behalf. So how do we even find those people? What people are worth putting to work on our behalf? And what do we offer? In the context of a job, you offer people money, you offer them a salary to go to work on your behalf to achieve your aims. But in the context of human relationships, what do you offer to them? Those are the things that we're going to cover today. But as I like to start all my lectures, I have a question I want us to start with. And please, let's have mics ready to go around. So think of this hypothetically. And maybe there's some of you here who are in this boat. You're trying to get into public service. And there's a senator, a very powerful senator who offers to mentor you. But this senator has a history of making policies that adversely affect your people. They have a history of just bad moral actions, of embezzlement. But working with them guarantees you access. It guarantees you influence and credibility to hypothetically even change things from within. Would you take their seats on the table? Would you accept their offer for mentorship, knowing all the things you know about them, and they are not people who fundamentally align with you values-wise? Would you take their offer for mentorship and be under their wings and accept them as a godfather, for lack of a better word? I'm curious what everyone thinks. You can just, put your hands up and... do you understand the question? Okay. All right. Who wants to go first?
Please take the question.
Okay, do you understand the context? Okay, so you're trying to get into public service. There's a senator who is very powerful, but they have a history of embezzlement. They have a history of making policies that affect your people very badly, and maybe have even affected you or your family members badly in the past. But the thing is, this senator is really powerful, and their presence, their mentorship, their presence in your life guarantees you access. It guarantees you some sort of credibility and power, like a seat at the table. And you potentially could hypothetically even change things from within once you have that seat, or if you have that seat. But you know that they are fundamentally not aligned with your values. You really have nothing in common with them from a values perspective. Would you accept the mentorship of this person, this senator? All right, we have a hand at the back. Just tell us your name, tell us what you do. You just go ahead, yeah.
My name is Ekezie. I am an innovation engineer. Personally, I would say my current boss, or my boss's boss, I have somewhat of a relationship like that with her.
Try to answer the question hypothetically.
Hypothetically, I would say that yes, I would work with them. I would take up the offer, because what I found within this relationship that I have is that every time I try to disconnect, something happens that I have to learn immediately after, right? So it's like I try to disconnect and move on from that phase, and I learn something new that helps me across other parts of my life. So I think you can put your ego aside, you can put your feelings aside.
No, it's not ego and feelings, it's values.
For me, it's the same thing, right? Yes, my values don't align. We see things differently, but at the end of the day, do they have a purpose that they serve me? And does that purpose move me forward? Absolutely.
Okay, what's your name again? Apote Harry. So he's saying he would, of course, the purpose of that relationship is transactional. He didn't use those words, but it's to move him forward, and he's going to take it definitely. Is there anyone who agrees or disagrees with him? All right.
All right, thank you so much. So while you were speaking, I was painting an image in my head already.
Yeah.
So there is this aspect of the world organizations that I don't like because of what they've done over the years. So I'm thinking, what if there is an opportunity to now be part of them, to learn what they do, see things how they see things, and all of that. Now that brings me to a book I'm reading about them. Now that's like how much I want to learn about them because I don't like what they've done. Yes, it's that much. So now that brings me back to the question: will I work with them? Yes. Why? Because I think two things. You need to understand how people think, so that before you can even influence them, you need to understand them. So the relationship has to be there. You need to have access to what they have access to. You need to understand what they understand. You need to know people that they know. You need to have access to those circles so that you can even put some level of influence. So will I work with them? Yes, based on that. And yes, the end point still has to be the end point. Transactional, but yeah, you get to get the value out of it.
Okay, so the end justifies the means. Is there anyone who thinks otherwise? Okay, there's two people there and I want to hear from both of them. Please give them mic.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Joshua and I disagree. I will not accept and here's the reason. First, it's mentorship we are talking about. Secondly, it's the other person offering to mentor you. I think mentorship is active, right? And I don't get to dictate the terms. So I'm getting it that there will be situations where I'll be asked to do certain things by my mentor, which my values don't align with, right? And at that point, I can't say no because I accepted your values, right? And down the road, I'll find out that I've eventually become this person. So, would I go into that expecting that I'm going to change things? Nah, I think it will be the other way around.
Interesting. What's your name?
Joshua.
Joshua. So Joshua is saying he would not accept this because, he would fundamentally change over the course of that mentorship, and that's not something he wants. I want to hear one person who disagrees with Joshua and thinks he's lying. Oh, she disagrees? All right. You agree with him. I want someone who disagrees. All right, there's a lady here.
Hi everyone. So my point of view might be weird, right? But just bear with me. So I think it's a very nuanced conversation because I think that you need proximity to effect any change. So, like, for instance, I think the first thing I would ask myself is, why am I actually going to mentor? Like, am I just accepting this mentorship, whatever, because I want to be mentored by him specifically, or because of my people, right? Those are the two questions I'll ask myself. So if it's just for mentorship, then it's going to be, nah, because, like he said, right, he's going to transfer his knowledge to me, and he's going to want me to do certain things that I do not accept. But then, if I think about it from, like, my people, what I would think is, from what he said, I'm going to have access to resources, to people. I'm definitely going to meet certain people along the line. So I would think about it that this opportunity is when this relationship, as we're talking, right, is going to give me access to certain resources, both human and material. Thank you very much. So it's going to, I'm genuinely going to accept it, and then it depends on what then happens during the mentorship. That then whether I'm going to engage or disengage. But that's basically what it is. I think it just depends on your why you are going into that. So you just have to answer that question for yourself. Thank you very much.
What's your name?
Amaka.
So Amaka, you're saying you will tell your constituent, as it were, that you're accepting mentorship from this person who has done things against them because you care about them. That's going to be a very hard sell.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, a different question, one that's maybe more personal now. I want to, of course, hear from other people. You formed a friendship with someone when you were in the trenches, say you were in university, you were at a job, and you're moving on, your trajectory is moving upward and forward, but they are still stuck. Not because they've tried and, they are just failing, but they refuse to do things that help them move forward. But you feel a certain sense of loyalty to this person. You guys were really close, maybe we were roommates in university, we're best friends in university. But you're done. You've outgrown the friendship, you've outgrown the relationship, it no longer serves you. You're no longer able to communicate with them. You both speak very different languages. What do? Do you tell them very openly that you're done with the friendship because it no longer serves you and it no longer serves them? Do you keep trying to pull them up by the bootstraps knowing you would never succeed? Or do you just ghost them and, whatever happens, happens? Yeah, show of hands. All right, let's start in front here.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
My name is Chika.
Hi, Chika.
So for me, I've been in a similar situation. So I just came out of a friendship that was like that. And I was the one that was let go.
Chika, we appreciate the honesty. Thank you.
So it was a funny conversation how the whole thing went. We graduated from school together. I moved out to Lagos for a job. She was still working. And then we grew apart. Life was life. We had jobs, we had things to do, and it was as though she was somewhere else, me, I was somewhere else. We were both trying to, pull each other up together. But that is just a different conversation. But for me, if I am in a hypothetical situation like this, the first thing is to have a conversation. People do not work well with ghosting. If you ghost me, I would literally want to run mad because I don't know what's happening. But I would want to have a conversation about it. This is how I feel about this thing. At this point in time, I am trying. Because that person can eventually get you into trouble. The person might be somewhere because of your sense of loyalty. You might want to compromise, to do things that does not align with your value just to help that person because it's my guy from way back. But then you have grown, you have experienced life, you are moving on. Life is taking you in a completely different direction, and it is only proper and only fair to the person in question that you have a conversation about it. Let it not be that there were things left unsaid. Say them. Let the person know. It could be that that's your one conversation is what will help them out of that place, or it might still leave them there. But then that is up to them. You have done your part. You have said what needs to be said. You have given them the necessary advice and the necessary help that you could give to them at that particular point in time. So when you do your best, when I do my best, I will answer. Thank you.
Well done. All right, we have a gentleman here. Yeah, just go ahead. The mic will come to you, please.
Okay. My name is Aman Nikanu, and I grew up in a very poor neighborhood, and I think it's opposite. Myself and her is opposite because I'm the one that left the guy. So what happened is that when we were growing up, we are very close, and we eat, we do everything together. But at any point in life, I found out that is not where I'm supposed to be. I have outgrown him, and there are a lot of things that we cannot discuss again. He drinks, like he is a drunkard now. Yeah, and anytime I travel back to his village, he tries to come close, and that is not where my life is. What we normally discuss is not where, and he wants us to also go back. So I have tried as much as possible to leave him. He said that you want to have a discussion with him. He can poison you. That is it, because he feels that you guys may party, and at the long run, because you are doing, like he used to tell me, is it because you are doing better than me now that you are not talking to me and all those kind of things? But I feel for him, I have tried humanly possible best to try to drag him, but I can't be dragging like somebody like me. Yeah, I just have to tell myself the truth. Yeah, this relationship is done for. I will do everything I can do for him as human, but not on a very close level. That is just me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanu. So Kanu is saying just ignore the person. There's nothing you can do that would ever work. One more perspective. All right, no, let's the lady in front.
Hi, I'm seeing what you message.
Please speak just a little louder.
Okay, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I'm in this dilemma. I genuinely do not know how to relate with my friend again. I'm trying to, but conversations are a bit strenuous now. I can't make perfect sense of what she is saying, and I can't bring her up to speed. I don't want to let her go because she's a great person. But at the same time, I've tried to, but if it's not a conversation or something very generic, very normal, I can't have a conversation. So it's not an answer per se. I mean, that's not fair.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you. One more. Does it? Yeah, the lady behind. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Nice.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for putting this together. So for this question, for me, I believe that I've been so intentional from when I was quite young about friendships. So I have made friends with people who are on the same wavelength as I am, or people who are driven. Let me just use that word. So I've had to tell a friend to sit up or let go.
Wow.
And yeah, that was like some years ago. And thankfully, the person, because I knew this person had so much potential, but then it was just as though they were stuck. And I also was at the point where I was trying to get unstuck. So I was just like, I want to get unstuck. And I want you to also move not at the same pace, but try to. Don't relent, because I've been trying to, and I told the person, if you don't sit up, I'm going to let go. And thankfully, the person did. But then recently, like last week, or this week, I had this conversation with another friend of mine that is very much driven, even more than I am. And I'm also I'm still sadly trying to get unstuck and do more, but then this person is moving at a very fast pace, a faster pace than I am. And the person was now starting to talk like me.
What goes around comes around.
Not even that. The person is quite an executioner. Like someone who thinks about something and goes on to do it. And then I'm the kind of person who wants to get all things perfect before I venture out. So the person was now starting to say, oh, you guys have been overthinking. I said, calm down. That is not your word. If you are saying that, then you have to look at people around you. And she said, you guys are the ones around me. I said, then you have to let go. And it sounded like quite tough, but then I know that people are scared. I read this book. People are scared of going further because they fear what people will say, fear the people that love them, how they would react to it. But then the truth is, people who love you genuinely would want better for you. So sometimes you may need people to let you go. But then I wouldn't want her to let me go, genuinely, because I want to move at speed or even more. But then I also understand that I would not want her to come down to my level of speed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate the balance, being on both ends of it. But the reason why I ask those questions is, of course, to get us thinking about the idea of relationships, and it's a very, very, very delicate matter, especially because we're young. The people who we build and maintain the closest relationships with now would have the most significant influence on us for the rest of our lives, especially people who are our peers, not necessarily even mentor-mentee relationships. The people who we're surrounded by, and sometimes some of this knowledge is cliche, but there's a reason why cliche things are cliche, because they are tried and true. And they've been around for a very long time, and across epochs and generations, they've been proven to be true. So I want to talk about 3 things today, and then we're going to go into Q&A. The first is, what makes you a backable person? And I'm going to tell us 5 things. What makes us backable people? The second is, how do we then, if we understand and establish this quality of being backable, how do we go on to build meaningful relationships? Hopefully, some personal anecdotes and things that have worked for me and I've seen work for people who I'm trying to imbibe. And finally, some mistakes we make with this, because we make so many mistakes, and I'm going to talk us through at least 5 mistakes we make, and then we'll go into Q&A. But before we even go into talking about what it means to be a backable person, at last month's lecture, for those of us who were here, we established that money, because last month we discussed money is one of the closest approximations that we have to the divine quality of omnipresence. So you are in a very specific place and your money is out there in the world making bets on your behalf. It's like an envoy that you have that's making votes for the sort of world you want to see and that you want us to live in. And that's exactly what the wealthiest people do. When Elon is sending rockets into space, it's because he thinks that's the world we should live in. He believes we should live in a world where we're able to inhabit Mars. But for all of us here, what are we doing with our own money? Or when we get to that point where we're billionaires, what articulation of value what articulation of the world do we want to live in and participate in? So that's a function of money. But relationships are exactly that, but even probably a little more infinitely. Because money is finite, resources are finite. There's almost always a number you can put on money. When you're measuring someone's net worth, there's a quantifiable metric that you can ascribe to it. But relationships are not that way. They are very infinite. When you build and steward a good relationship with someone, what those people are is they are also envoys on your behalf. They are ambassadors. They are extensions of your ambition. They are mentioning your names in rooms where you aren't. They are carrying your spirit in some sense. So when opportunities, for example, and this is me talking about things in a very transactional way, but when opportunities, for example, come up, they understand whether or not that's relevant to you, what you think, based on who you are, based on what they know about you. And that's a ripple. There's nothing as valuable as a good word of mouth referral from someone who is credible on your behalf. It's worth more than any money. I was listening to Cosmos Maduka describe, this concept of relationships recently, and he says, if a wealthy person gives you money, they've cheated you, because that's the least thing they could give to you. The most important thing they could give to you is a referral, is a reference in your honor. It is speaking words to other people that position you in a positive light. But for some reason, and one of the reasons why our generation, and me included, and I'm not wagging fingers at anyone, why we don't seem to do this very well. And this is one of the things that the generation of our parents did way better than us. We're doing very many things better than them, but this is one thing that they're doing very, or they did better than us. And one of the reasons why is we live in a world where you don't necessarily need relationships to get everything done. You could, for example, build an online following and get wealthy as a result. But they lived in a time where for you to get anything of value done, you needed relationships. And that's why you see like some of our parents would spend 12 hours in a vehicle going to attend the funeral or the wedding of the daughter of a colleague who they absolutely hate. But they are doing it anyway. They are gossiping about them, but they are still doing those things because they understand. They understand how important relationships are. And they grew up and existed at a time where without the ability to cultivate and nurture those over time, it's impossible for you to get business done. As a business owner, during festive seasons, I get gifts from different sorts of people. And it's almost very funny, right? I could stack rank it. My business partners, people who I work with who are older, are almost always the ones who send me gifts. The ones who are younger send me a text message. And maybe I do same too. But there's something we can learn. There's something we can learn and do better as a people. And I think it's one of the easy ways to outcompete most people. If you're someone in this generation who is good at building and stewarding relationships, you have a leg up on most people. So please take this seriously. And hopefully we leave here today with some very practical ways for us to start to do that. Relationships are these infinite extensions of yourself. When someone likes you, when someone trusts you, you have access to everyone they have access to. So, when you know 10 people and 10 people know 10 people, think of that. Like if we continue to extrapolate that ad infinitum, you're connected to at least 1 billion people, or at least your reputation could be connected to 1 billion people. And that travels very fast. It travels faster than your money could travel. I think money and material things are a very weak substitute for relationships. The reason why I'm saying this is I'm trying to establish why it's important, because I don't think we understand why relationships and maintaining and nurturing them are important. I say this, that having a friend who owns a private jet is better than owning a private jet. Yeah, because first, you don't have to deal with the burden of taking care of a private jet, because who the hell wants that? But secondly, it's not just about the access to that material resource, right? It's goodwill in motion. It's trust in motion. If I can give you access to this thing which I own, there's almost nothing that I own that I can't give you access to. So, think about it. You can be really broke, i.e. you don't have any money in your pocket or in your bank account, but you're really wealthy in relationships. And that's why people who are wealthy, they often tend to be risk takers and type A personalities, but that's why they actually don't mind putting all their money at risk. And I've used the example of Elon Musk. It's a great example, but not just people like Elon. Entrepreneurs who have spent time building relationships understand that money, like the physical element of having cash, matters very little in the context of having relationships, because if you have relationships, you can make it back immediately. That's why it's very important, and I desperately believe that as a generation, we need to take it a lot more seriously. So, where do we start? The fundamental problem is we don't understand what it means to become people who are backable. So when you meet someone and tell someone, I want to be your friend, or whether or not you tell them, or you make, motions and gestures towards trying to be friends, with someone, or you want someone to mentor you, or you even want to mentor someone, the question they would ask themselves implicitly is, why you versus the rest of the 8 billion people in the world? Why should I spend my time on you? If you meet someone who is wealthy, they're really busy. But one of the things that they want to do is they actually want to find someone young who is on a trajectory that's meaningful and positive, and do everything that they can with the limited time that they have to support that person. So there is significant competition for their time and attention. So why do you deserve to be befitting of that friendship? Think of everyone who we ideally want to be friends with. We need to, as we say in local parlance, bring something to the table that makes them pick an interest in us and want to back us in that sense. And backability here is not just money, it's time, it's resources, it's word of mouth, it's referrals, it's all of those things. So how do we become people who are backable? How do we become that? A lot of times when people meet me or meet other people I know and say, I want you to mentor me, that's not enough. That's not enough of a sell. Why you? And you don't even need to say it if you become that person. There are at least five characteristics, and these are extrapolations based on my personal experience and experience of people who I know. So these are definitely tried and true. And I'm sure this list is non-exhaustive. But many people are liked. It's easy to like people, but very few people are trusted with opportunity. And the way our world works, most of the opportunity in the world, whether it's economic opportunity, are allocated on the basis of trust. And that's why up until last century, most corporations in the world were owned by families, because of course there's trust. Your family members, you could trust them with responsibility. And of course you ignore the ones who were just vagabonds, and you placed resources, you placed responsibility in the hands of people that you trust. But that's still the way most of the world works. People want to know that they can trust you with responsibility. Liking you is one thing. It's easy. If you're funny, people like you. If you're a good time, people like you. If you have fancy things and you know how to make the room lively, people like you. But that doesn't mean they trust you. At least it doesn't mean they can trust you with responsibility. How do you become someone who people trust with responsibility? So 5 characteristics. Number 1 is moral clarity. So what I mean by moral clarity is people will back someone who has an obvious internal compass, whether or not they agree with you, but they need to see that you have an internal compass that's leading you in a specific direction. And I say this a lot, but when people choose who to build, relationships, especially ones that are of value with, The thing about people who, whether or not I'm in your life, whether or not I support you, whether or not I give you what you say you want from me, I know you're going to find a way to get it done. So it's just going to be my honor to be a part of this in whatever way I can be a part of this. And it's the Matthew principle, right? To those who have, more is just going to be given. So you need to in some way become someone who has. And when we say someone who has, a lot of times we think about it as, oh, well, I need to have so much money. I was born poor, so I don't have money. Or I went to a school that's not so great, so I don't have friends who are really smart. I don't have a co-founder. I don't work at a place that's really great. Those are not necessarily the first things you need to have. The first thing you need to have is an internal compass. What do you care about? In what direction are your interests taking you? And who are you fundamentally as a person? What do you believe? Like, those things need to be super crisp and clear through your actions, through your thoughts, through your work, right? Through your work, through whatever it is. But you need to be someone who clearly has a compass. Because if not, no one wants to take on the responsibility of being the person to tell you where to go and then show you how to go there. Like, you need to be on a journey. You need to be on a journey. And when you go to people practically, you're coming to them with problems that are problems that you encounter in the field. You're not telling them about, I want to do this, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do because 5 years down the line, I may experience 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. They wouldn't take you very seriously. You don't even take yourself very seriously if you're a person who doesn't have a moral compass in some sense. So it's very important to note, people don't have to agree with you. They don't even have to like you. But you need to have an internal compass. And an internal compass comes from figuring out who you are, what your identity is, the things that you believe, and what direction you want your life to go in. If you have that set, you are already different from at least 50% of people. Like, if you do that alone, you're at a vantage point, and it makes it much easier for you to be in the equation when the die is cast. The second thing, which is a natural derivative from the first, is a bias towards action. And that's the second characteristic of people who are backable. People who are biased towards action, they do before they pitch. They don't tell you lofty stories about things that they are going to do over and over and over and over and over again without taking that first step. And honestly, I understand why we do that. We do that because we're afraid, and a lot of times it's a little easier for us to talk ourselves into doing the things that we know we're supposed to do by going on and on and on about it. But look, the muscle to bias towards action is something that we have to develop. It's painful, right? There's no easy way out of it. The only way out of it is really through it. But people want to see that you are already on a journey, that you've taken steps. No one wants to be the first point of call when it comes to the actions, the things you say you want to do with your life. No one wants to be the cold start for you, right? They want you to come to them with evidence of work that you've done, a body of work that you've done, and tell them that based off of that, these are the next things that you're going to do, and you just sound more credible. Not just do you sound more credible, your own internal convictions are built, because we build convictions by doing things. We don't build convictions by things, by seeing it not work and then seeing it start to work, by going like that motion. That's really how we build conviction, and that way we are strengthened and emboldened. It's very easy for you to know when someone doesn't believe what they are saying, when their lips are just moving and there's nothing about what they're saying that's true to them. You know that, and we all know when we're people who are acting that out. So we have to become people who bias towards action. How? There's no strategic tip that I'm going to give you. It's do what you say you're going to do. It might be very lofty, but maybe reduce it to a very fundamental crucible that if I did not do this, it's almost foolish for me to not do this. Make it so easy. Make it so easy for you to do it, to get started. We also do this thing where, we wait for permission. We wait for permission from other people, from our parents, from our partners, from our friends, because we don't want people to think of us as, to be exposed to this new identity, to think of us as people who are foolish and don't know what we're doing. And this holds us back fundamentally from being people who bias towards action. The third thing is, of course, connected to this, is building a history of follow-through. People who are backable have a history of executing on things that they say that they would, and ideally stay at it for a long time and do a very good job of just going at it, galvanizing the resources that are available to them to go through it. So what does this mean? This doesn't mean that they have to be successful. Honestly, most times people don't care about whether or not you were successful at the endeavors that you were doing before now. But what they care about is, what lessons did you learn? Did you actually go right through with doing the things that you said you will? And what are you going to do next? Based off of the lessons that you've done now, what new mistakes are you going to make? And are you not going to repeat the mistakes that you made before now? So in order for you to be backable, you have to come to the table with some history of following through on things that you say that that you said that you would do. And the fourth thing is, backable people, and this is from experience, are almost always incredibly receptive to brutal feedback. They are not people who are sensitive. They are not people who have egos so high that constructive criticism of their efforts or their approach causes them to shrink. I'll tell you this for free. People who are successful, people who are way ahead of the journey than you, when you go to them and tell them to mentor you, they are probably not going to spend any time telling you about how cool you are. They're just going to pick it apart and tear it apart, and you might leave there feeling more foolish than you actually are, right? Or maybe you're just that foolish, and maybe that's true. But so you need to grow tough skin, and they pay attention to that. They really pay attention to that. No matter how smart you are, no matter how intelligent you are, if you're not someone who can absorb feedback, go and reflect on the feedback and act on the feedback and come back to the table, the next time you meet with them, with these are the things that I've done based on your feedback the last time. I understood that this was true. I understood that these are the ways you were right, and maybe these are the ways you were wrong. But I just want you to know that I acted on that feedback. The reason why this is important is not just even for your relationship with other people. It's for your relationship with yourself. Many people, especially if you're neurotic like me, you're your biggest critique. You know the things that are fundamentally wrong with you. And that's good. I think that's an asset. But what's the best way to weaponize an asset like that is when you give yourself feedback, because that's exactly what you do when you know the things that are wrong with you. Of course, it's not just knowing the things that are wrong with you so you can have a negative self relationship with yourself. It's knowing the things that are wrong so you know what to act on and know what to fix. So the reason why this is important is we stop avoiding those things. We stop avoiding staring into the abyss, for lack of a better word. And we can pick and choose the things we know we need to face head on at different points in our lives, face them head on, get better at them, and move on to other things. And when we have this relationship with ourselves, when we're able to stare at ourselves and know all the things that we need to fix, it's much easier for us to get feedback from other people, because there's nothing that they'll tell you about yourself that you don't already know. The only thing that probably will be different is, well, okay, I probably need to prioritize working on this now. Maybe I thought I had more time, but you probably don't. So that ability to take feedback and to act on it, and I'll say culturally we're at a disadvantage because the culture we're in is not one that encourages that. So in order for you to become someone who takes and implements feedback, you have to be countercultural in some sense. If you were born and raised in this country, right, that's going to be very important. And how you know you're working on it is you feel it pain, like you feel pain, you feel it burn. It's going to be a very painful process, especially at the beginning, and over time it becomes part and parcel of who you are. But this is very important. A lot less ego, the mortification of our ego and our own self-interest against our own growth is an exercise that when we go on helps us become people who are more backable. And the final thing I would say on how you become someone who is backable is clear, independent thinking. It's very hard if you sound like everyone else. If the only sources of truth you have are Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, where everyone else has access to that, it is going to be really difficult. It's going to be really difficult. You have to find and identify, find the ability to think independently for yourself, right? I mean, we all live in a marketplace of information. We're swarmed in information daily. So you have to develop that ability to filter information that you receive through the lenses of the things that you believe. Ultimately, it comes down to your foundational identity. And you need to form a perspective on the world. Beyond just the world, whatever it is you say you're interested in, your profession, you need to form a perspective on it. That's how you become backable. You can't go to someone and tell them about something that you're working on or something that you want to do, and they know about it more than you do, and they are not even in your industry. All they think is you're not serious, and that's just the truth. Like, if that's the case, then you're not serious, right? The ability to develop your own thinking, to be countercultural. Not everything that's popular is correct. And that's very important. When you think about it, and I work in technology, and when venture capitalists and private equity investors make bets, they don't make bets on things that they think are correct, because they have no idea what's correct. But what they look for is, one, does this person believe what they are saying? Two, do they have a track record of doing things, doing something? Does that exist? And thirdly, how independent is this? Like, if the idea that they are coming to the table with is one that everybody has insight into and can come up with, then not much value is placed on that. The more contrarian, the more valuable the company is. The more contrarian, the more valuable it is. And that's why an idea like Airbnb, an idea like Uber, now it seems so simple, but incredibly contrarian at the time, and went on to work and became incredibly valuable companies. But this is not just about companies. This is not just about business. This is about even our personal lives. The ability for clear, independent thinking is going to set you apart from the herd. And when it comes to time for people to choose where they spend their time, when they spend where, on what humans, on what people they pour their time and attention into, you're really going to stand out because of the clarity and the independence of your thoughts, no matter where it may lead you. Those are at least 5 things that when we do, if we do very deeply, they help us become people who are more backable, people who other people want to throw their weight behind and vouch for. And there's nothing that goes as far as the ability for other people, especially people who are credible, to vouch for us. So, how do you build meaningful relationships that are relevant for the phases where you are in life, but also the relationships that last, relationships that aren't just built on, like your love for pop culture? As important as that is, it doesn't provide a solid enough foundation for a relationship that lasts a long time. The first way to build a relationship, and this applies whether you don't have to be extroverted, you don't have to know how to network, you don't have to know how to do all those funny things in order for you to build relationships. The first way is to build things with people. And I'll say this too, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to do this. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to do this. But building things with people is one of the most effective ways to build relationships with them. It forms the root of genuine connection, because you all are not just connected on fleeting things or fleeting interests. You're connected on memories that are birthed from trying to solve problems that hopefully are tough and difficult enough that it brings all of you on your toes, or it brings both of you on your toes. And that's why, for example, it's widely proven that couples in marriages that have a shared sense of purpose and are working on something together practically, that have something that they are working on together, tend to, of course, do better and last longer than couples that don't. The reason why is because in doing work and building things, we find purpose, we find individual purpose. And purpose is best when it's shared. And that's one of the most effective ways. I spent 4 years in university debating competitively when I was at University of Calabar. And some of the relationships I built in those years were are some of my closest relationships in my life till date, 10 years later, something like that. Some of the memories that I shared with my friends and acquaintances at the time are still some of my favorite memories. And the reason why is I was at a point where I was doing something I really liked and playing at the edge of my potential. And then I was surrounded by people who were doing that, who were reinforcing that for me, who I was competing with, who I was building with, who I was growing with at the time. And there's nothing that we remember and are more inspired by than those times, like those moments of growth and the people who we were surrounded by in those times. So that's why the quality of trying to build something, trying to go from 0 to 1 on something with people, with other people, those are memories that really stick out, because you find depth there. You also find your worst self when you're trying to take something from 0 to 1, right? You fight, you argue, you make up. All of those things come to the fore, and very practically they form the foundations for what ultimately go on to become really good relationships. The second way is to be useful first. If you want to develop a relationship with someone and you're thinking, well, what does this person have to offer me? You're thinking about it wrong. And it probably even shows that that's not a relationship you should. Because if all you're asking is, what do they have to offer me? You're placing them at a higher pedestal than you are. You're not thinking of them as your peer. And if someone is on a higher plane than you are, why would they want to build a relationship with someone who is on a lower plane than they are? So find a way to be useful first. And if you keep that as a running, ongoing principle for how you deal with people, what that does for you is it allows you excavate the things that are good and positive about you that you might not have the opportunity to interact with on a daily basis. So in going through that exercise, you think, what am I good for? What am I useful for? What can I genuinely offer to someone that could make their life better? And it doesn't even need to be at a grand scale. It could be in this moment, here and right now. What can I do for this person that helps make their life better? And by doing that, you fall in love with yourself a little bit more. And in a way that's not self-indulgent or self-aggrandizing, but you actually start to understand and recognize by the time you have 10, 15, 20 people who you're doing things for on an ongoing basis, on a consistent basis, you don't have to think so far to figure out, what am I good for? What am I useful for? What is my purpose? You don't have to think too far, because it's practical. There are people who are relying on you for very specific things. And there's nothing that builds a stronger bond than that. And if you're someone who has the nature of depositing into your relationships first, as many times as you can, not keeping score, those relationships pay back the most over time. And of course, relationships are not transactions. They are not quid pro quo. It's not, I pay you, you pay me, and I'm keeping scores. That's a really terrible way to think about relationships, especially the ones that are going to change our lives. They are games that we play for a very long time. There are seasons you go through where for 2-3 years, all you're doing is just giving to someone. All you're doing is just giving. They're not giving you anything in return. And you have to be someone who wants things with a long-term mindset, but also has a perspective to see the good in other people, for you to know that that relationship is not one that you've outgrown, or is one that's useless to you. Or you might go through a season where someone is just doing things for you, and you might feel very indebted, and as some of us do, we run away when people do nice things for us, right? But that's a wrong way to think about it. That's a wrong way to think about it. The way you give to other people, and you should think of giving to other people first, you should also allow other people the opportunity to give to you, to deposit, to invest in you. If you think of it as, giving them the opportunity to be blessed by the gift of that friendship, then you open up yourself to allow yourself, receive from them. The third thing is, and how you build meaningful friendships, is radical honesty. Radical honesty. And the reason why is, honesty is, in our day and age, and I'm trying to not sound old about this, but it's actually rare. Like I deeply respect people who have the capacity for honesty, people who don't flatter, People who, when they say something, you know they mean it. When they tell you this is good, you know it's good. When it's bad, they are going to tell you it's bad. When it's not great, it's just there. They tell you exactly as it is. And if you work in a corporate organization, and I tend to interact with people in the West quite a bit, and there's this toxic positivity that permeates how we do it, or at least is expected. Maybe not so much in Nigeria, but in the rest of the world for sure, where everything you do is okay, it's all right, it's fine. But deep down, people don't think it's good, but they can't tell it to you in your face. But who do you respect? For sure, I respect people who are able to give me candid feedback about whether or not no matter how much it will hurt in the moment, about whether or not, my output, what I did, met the mark. By how much did they miss the mark? That ability for candor, people really respect that. And that is a distinctive enough attribute for people to keep you in their lives. If all you do for them is you keep them honest. When you start dating someone foolish and you go and ask them, I'm talking to this person, you can trust the feedback they'll give to you. And when they tell it to you, you know they mean it. When you're thinking about making professional decisions, and they give you feedback, they tell you what to do. If they are your bosses and they give you feedback, the day they tell you you did good, you trust and deeply believe that you did good. Those are people we all seek to have in our lives. And we could become those people. People really appreciate honesty. People like it when you don't lie to them. People like it when you don't tell them things to comfort them in the moment. Because a lot of times, people are not looking necessarily to be lied to in the moment for their own comfort. Even if they come to you, seeking that, we really don't want that. We want people who can keep us honest and keep us accountable. We respect them for sure. Even if we might not necessarily like them, we ultimately respect them in the long run. And if you're that, you have a leg up on most people. It helps you build respect faster than being charming. Being charming is nice, but being honest is way better. Treat people as long-term allies. Don't treat them as short-term leverage. Don't treat people as I'm trying to use you as a leg up to get access to something, and once I'm done with that, then I'm just not going to talk to you for a long time, or that's what I wanted to use you for. One, people recognize when you're that sort of person, especially if they're experienced. If they're experienced and they're mature, they've seen very many people, who want to use them as a leg up, as short-term leverage. And when they find out that you're that person, they don't take it very seriously. But more importantly, for your own self, right, treating people like long-term allies, a lot of relationships compound, the fruits of most relationships do not accrue in the first 5 years of the relationship. Personally, when I think about my longest friendships, my longest professional relationships, and I think back at the first 5 years of those relationships, we probably were just getting to know each other in the first 5 years. You really start to see the fruit of relationships, as it starts to age. That's when it really starts to compound. And we're not just talking relationships here, I gave you a referral to get an opportunity or to get a gig. That's important, but what we're talking about here is relationships that fundamentally can go on to change your life. Those relationships compound over time, so you have to play the long game. When you make decisions in the context of that friendship, you think about the long term. They could be making terrible decisions right now. They could be annoying the hell out of you right now. The relationship might be going through a rough patch for months, but that doesn't mean it's done. When you zoom out and take a look at the broader sweep of the relationship, you understand that, well, if you're a long-term ally for me, then it informs how you act in the moment in response to them. And the final thing I'm going to say on this is follow your curiosity and allow your relationships to follow that. So don't artificially try to gerrymander your way into relationships because someone is cool, or they have friends, or they have things that you want, or being friends with them might validate something in you. Figure out what you're really curious about. What topics are you curious about? What interests do you have? And follow those as much and as closely as you can. And of course, relationships would follow that naturally. Whether that's relationships, that stem from people who you meet in the playing field, or relationships from people who recognize the work that you're doing by following your curiosity, and then want to find a way to serve you, want to find a way to support you, want to find a way to work with you. Those relationships would follow. And that's why it's very important to work with people who are at least as obsessed about what you're doing as you are. Find people who are at least as obsessed, ideally way more obsessed, way smarter than you. The whole thing of you shouldn't be the smartest person in the room, that's true. I mean, you can't always control for it, but when you can, please find people who are better than you. Find people who are way ahead of the journey than you, and be friends with them. Don't worship them. Like it's disgusting. Like, I know we have a culture of honor that's weird sometimes in our here, but don't worship them. Be friends with them. And the reason why being friends with them is important is it would call for things in you that are required to be friends with them. You're not a subject. You're not expected to kneel and lay and no, that's be friends with them. That way you would have to grow into a friendship with them. And it forces a lot out of you. You don't think of yourself as someone who is subservient. You start to think of yourself as a peer. And when you start to think of yourself as a peer to them, you start to act that way. You start to work towards being a peer with them. And that's how you expedite that journey of growth and development. But most importantly, you have to understand that you're someone who is even deserving of being friends with them. And if you don't think you're deserving, and genuinely so, if you genuinely don't think you're deserving just yet, then hold it out. There's relationships that we should hold out for when we are ready, for much further in our future. I had the opportunity to meet a very cool, senior partner at a global consulting firm years ago, when knowing him was still a big deal. And he was working on something in agriculture at the time. And a friend of mine who had a startup in agriculture, I reached out to him, like, oh, I just met this man. Like, do you want me to intro you? He's like, nah, we're not there yet. We're not ready yet for that. And I remember being taken aback by that in 2017. Like, very interesting. But years after, I think I understand. Of course, it's very clear. You don't want to approximate towards relationships that you're not ready for, that you genuinely know you're not ready for and deserving in that moment. You want to play it out. You want to play the long game, believing that the future version of you is going to get access to those relationships anyways, if you continue to, work at the things that you say you will. I guess finally and very quickly, what are mistakes we make? What are mistakes I've seen people make? What are mistakes I've made? The first mistake is we try to network versus just doing things. Trying to network, the emails we send out to people, and I really recommend that. I recommend trying to reach out to and shoot your shots, but when we artificially try to build a relationship without one caring about the person we're trying to build that relationship with, to being mischievous about it. You really know you want them for something or some leverage, but you're almost lying to them and you're telling them something else. Maybe you want a referral from them, maybe you want a picture with them, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is you want from them. But, you try to mask it as a relationship. People don't of course, people clearly can sniff that out, but people really don't respect that. And I know sometimes we don't do it because we're malicious. We don't do it because we're bad people. It's because we don't know how to. But please, let's refrain from the artificialness of trying to network with people. A much more viable alternative is just do things. If you want to do something, if you want to work on something, find a way to start to work on it. More often than not, if you reach out to someone who is ahead of the journey with a thoughtful question that's very specific, that they can answer, you tell them why you think they can answer it or why you think they can help, and you're honest about it, more often than not, they'll be inclined to help if you're able to get their attention. That if you're able to reach out to them, if you're able to find someone who knows them, convey, your message to them, people are much more generous than we think we are. So let's act in that understanding that people are much more generous than we suspect that they are. Build something, work on something, do something in the context of where you work. Just do great things and your network would follow you. You wouldn't have to go out to network. The second thing is, we sometimes, when we do this wrongly, we prioritize polish over substance. So I'm going to brand, I'm going to, make myself look a certain way versus just be that thing. It costs as much time to make yourself seem to be something. Like, just, the alternative is just be that thing. Just go do that thing. As opposed to trying to seem like that thing. The reason why is it makes us come off as disingenuous. And it's a very big mistake when we're trying to build relationships that are long-term, because no one wants to invest their time. You don't want to invest your time, networking, spending time with people who are disingenuous. Like, that doesn't work. So just don't be that person. The third mistake we make, and we alluded to some of that when we started the conversation today, is sometimes we fail to outgrow relationships that are stale, relationships that no longer serve us. And we need to be, it's a delicate conversation to have with ourselves. It's a delicate decision to make. But sometimes it's overwhelmingly obvious when we need a new set of relationships. We need a new tribe. Everyone needs a gang. So you need a new gang to get you to where you're trying to go. And carrying baggage and stragglers is not going to help you get there. So what do? Even if it's temporarily, you have to let go of that. Not just you have to let go of that, you should not carry guilt for letting go of that with you, because all of that just sets you back. Especially if you come from a place where, come from a background where there's so much you have to overcome to get to where you want to go, then, keep your journey as light as possible in that sense. The fourth thing is, don't be boring. Like, that's a mistake we make. Like, honestly, don't be boring. Don't be cliche. Don't tell the same line. This is a much more tactical thing when you're trying to build relationships with people. The most important thing that, the most significant thing that makes you stand out, of course, is who you are. Like I said earlier, that clarity and independence of thought that allows you stand out. And even in a 5-minute conversation, people can see through you and they know what you believe. And that's interesting. People like you when they meet an interesting person. That's why when we meet some people, people who are funny, we're happy, because it's so hard to be funny. It's honestly so hard to be funny. And so when we meet funny people, they're interesting. But being funny is not the only way to be interesting. It's even I think of it as a primal way to be interesting. It's one of the base primal ways to be interesting. There are other ways to be interesting: by believing things, by saying things, by embodying things that are just not common, that are not common to people of your age, of your background, of your class, of all of those sociological markers that people expect you to be and would use to define you. And when you're interested, the world just opens up to you in a way that's much better, much easier. Your path is a lot easier when you're someone who is interested. Do everything you can to be interested. This doesn't mean, of course, like try to go viral or do funny things. That's not what it means to be interested. It means having an interesting personality, embodying that capability of what it means to be interesting. And it's not something you can hide. It's not something you can hide. It just becomes like the city set on a hill. It's impossible to hide that, honestly, if you become someone interesting. And finally, the final mistake we make is we are too scared of rejection. We're too scared of rejection, right? It's almost like a plague. So we have to get more comfortable knowing that everyone gets rejected. Everyone gets rejected. The person you look up to at work is getting rejected every day by his bosses or her bosses. That founder is getting rejected every day by employees and by VCs. I saw someone send me a screenshot of a health tech startup founder in 2021 who reached out to an employee he was trying to hire after they raised their pre-seed round. And he reached out to the person and said, "Oh, hey, like, my name is this. We just graduated from Y Combinator and we're trying to hire for this role and we think you'd be a good fit." The person replied, oh, hey, I just went through your company on Crunchbase. My current salary is more than your entire pre-seed round. You know, and that founder, like the company ended up doing really well. Like, it's doing really well now. And of course, one of those things that person will look back at and be like, Jesus, I was stupid. But even the best people you see today, there's so many rejections. You know, one of my favorite founders, the founder of Airbnb, said one of the things that he does and that he still has to today is all the rejection letters they got from investors when Airbnb started that described how ridiculous the idea was, how weird it is, how much they couldn't understand it. He put it up, framed it, and he looks at it for inspiration. When the company was going through crisis in 2020 as a result of the pandemic and was almost going to go down, just looking through that made him remember, we've been through worse times and we're going to get through these times. So everyone gets rejected. That beautiful girl who you're trying to bag, there are people who are rejecting her. And same thing for the guy. Like, everyone gets rejected. So we need to get more comfortable. You know, we need to get more comfortable with rejection because we're going to experience it. And a life spent avoiding rejection is a much more smaller version of the lives that we could be living. If you're trying to live a life that is big, that is impactful, that does great things for yourself, for your community, for the people around you, then you're going to have to be prepared to be rejected a lot. Even beyond rejected, you need to be ready to be heckled, to be dragged, as we said, to be all of those things. And it shouldn't, of course it shouldn't faze you, because that's part for the course. It's part and parcel of the journey that's set forth before you. To tie all of this together, like I started out saying, we're all growing up in a generation where we don't pay as much attention and importance as we do to relationships. We think of people as disposable, as dispensable, as replaceable, and that's not true. That's not true. People are not replaceable, and honestly, even I have to remind myself of that very often. Very often, people are not replaceable. Don't underestimate, don't undermine the role that people are playing in your life, even if it's not obvious to you. And we shouldn't wait to lose it till we understand how important it is. And if we have that mindset, then we know that we need to be a little bit more on the offense when it comes to building meaningful relationships. Because relationships, especially when we build them right, they steward our growth. They are people, they form guardrails for how we grow, in the manner, the direction we grow. Think of it as if you think of yourself as a tree that's trying to grow, then, the relationships are people who are formed around that tree, ensuring that it's growing up and to the right, and it's exposed to the sun, and it's gaining all the nutrients that it should to grow in a way that's healthy. We do not isolate, and I don't mean just physically, right? Do not isolate. Do not look down on people who are your peers, who are just as foolish as you today, right? Developing that ability and quality to spot the potential in people, the trajectory is probably going to be a very important skill for us to build. And hopefully we get to stand out, we get to build this unfair advantage, because it's an unfair advantage. If you have the ability to build and nurture relationships in our generation, you have an unfair advantage, and I wish us all the success with that. We're going to go to Q&A right now.